Imagine being called lazy by your teacher, and that teacher has no idea you're the mayor's daughter. Yeah, this really happened. You might think teachers should always know better, but this one crossed a line, big time. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Westfield Academy as Sophia Richardson stood at the imposing wrought iron gates, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. At 15 years old, she was about to embark on a journey that would shape her future in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The prestigious private high school loomed before her, its red brick facade and towering clock tower a symbol of academic excellence and social prestige. Sophia took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the straps of her backpack. She was more than ready for this challenge, having spent countless hours preparing over the summer. Yet, as she watched her new classmates stream past her, chatting and laughing with the easy familiarity of old friends, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider. "You've got this, Sophia," she whispered to herself, squaring her shoulders and taking her first step onto the campus that would be her home for the next 4 years. As she walked, Sophia couldn't help but think about the conversation she'd had with her parents the night before. Her father, Mayor Daniel Richardson, had sat her down in his study, his usually commanding presence softened by the warmth in his eyes. "Sophia," he'd said, his deep voice filled with pride, "you're about to start a new chapter in your life. Your mother and I want you to know how proud we are of you." Sophia had smiled, basking in the glow of her father's approval. But then his expression had turned serious, and she'd known what was coming next. "You understand why we've decided to keep your connection to me low profile, don't you?" he'd asked, his brow furrowing slightly. Sophia had nodded. Even as a small part of her wished she could just be normal, without the weight of her father's position hanging over her. "I know, Dad. You want me to have a normal high school experience, to make it on my own merits." Her mother, Evelyn, a successful lawyer known for her sharp mind and compassionate heart, had joined them then, placing a reassuring hand on Sophia's shoulder. "That's right, sweetheart. But remember, you have every right to be there. Your intelligence and hard work earned you that spot, not your last name." Now, as Sophia navigated the crowded hallways of Westfield Academy, those words echoed in her mind. She was here on her own merits, and she was determined to prove that she belonged. The first class of the day was history with Mr. Thompson. Sophia had heard whispers about him in the hallways. Apparently, he was known for his rigorous teaching style and high expectations. As she entered the classroom, she felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Mr. Thompson stood at the front of the room, a tall, imposing figure with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess each student as they entered. When his gaze fell on Sophia, something flickered in his expression. Was it surprise? Disapproval? She couldn't quite tell, but it made her uneasy. "Welcome, class," Mr. Thompson began as the bell rang. His voice was crisp and authoritative. "I hope you're all prepared for a challenging year. In this class, we'll be diving deep into the complexities of world history, and I expect nothing less than your best efforts." As he spoke, his eyes kept returning to Sophia, who tried to meet his gaze confidently. But when he suddenly called on her, she felt her heart jump. "You there in the back. What's your name?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Sophia, sir. Sophia Richardson," she replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. Mr. Thompson's eyebrow arched slightly. "Well, Ms. Richardson, I hope you're ready to work hard in this class. I don't tolerate laziness or attitude from any of my students, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Is that clear?" Sophia blinked, taken aback by the harshness in his tone. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, curious and slightly uncomfortable. "Yes, sir," she managed to say, her mind racing to understand why he seemed to have singled her out. As the class progressed, Sophia tried to shake off the unsettling encounter. She participated actively in the discussion, offering thoughtful insights into the historical events they were studying. But each time she spoke, Mr. Thompson seemed to find a way to criticize or dismiss her contributions. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Sophia felt drained. As she gathered her books, she overheard a group of students whispering nearby. "Did you see how Mr. Thompson was treating that new girl?" one of them said, her voice low but filled with indignation. Yeah, it was weird, another replied. She seemed smart. I wonder what his problem is. Sophia pretended not to hear, but their words stayed with her as she made her way to her next class. She tried to rationalize Mr. Thompson's behavior. Maybe he was just trying to challenge her, to push her to do her best. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. As the day wore on, Sophia found herself both exhilarated and exhausted by the whirlwind of new experiences. She met other teachers, some kind and encouraging, others stern but fair. She navigated the complex social landscape of the cafeteria, finding a quiet corner to eat her lunch and observe her peers. It was during this time that she met Mia Chun, a vibrant girl with a quick smile and an even quicker wit. Mia plopped down next to Sophia without invitation, her tray laden with what looked like every dessert option available. "Hi there," Mia said brightly. "You're new, right? I'm Mia. I figured you could use some company, and honestly, I could use someone to help me eat all these cookies. I may have gone a little overboard." Sophia couldn't help but laugh, feeling some of the tension from earlier melt away. "I'm Sophia, and I'd be happy to help with the cookie situation." As they chatted, Sophia found herself relaxing for the first time that day. Mia was easy to talk to, filling her in on the ins and outs of Westfield Academy with a humorous commentary that had Sophia in stitches. "So, how are you liking it so far?" Mia asked, nibbling on her third chocolate chip cookie. Sophia hesitated, thinking about her encounter with Mr. Thompson. "It's interesting," she said finally. "The classes seem challenging, which is good." But Mia leaned in, her expression turning serious. "But what? Did something happen?" Sophia sighed, deciding to confide in her new friend. "It's probably nothing, but in history class, Mr. Thompson seemed to, I don't know, single me out. He was pretty harsh, and I'm not sure why." Mia's brow furrowed. "Mr. Thompson can be tough, but that doesn't sound right. Did he say anything specific?" As Sophia recounted the incident, she could see Mia's expression darkening. "That's not okay, Sophia," Mia said firmly. "You shouldn't have to deal with that, especially on your first day." Sophia shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Maybe it'll get better. I don't want to make a big deal out of nothing." Mia looked like she wanted to say more, but the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As they gathered their things, Mia touched Sophia's arm. "Hey, if it happens again, or if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here, okay?" Sophia felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thanks, Mia. That means a lot." As she headed to her afternoon classes, Sophia felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. The encounter with Mr. Thompson still nagged at her, but Mia's friendship had given her a boost of confidence. She was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead with grace and determination. The rest of the day passed in a blur of new faces, information overload, and the constant hum of activity that filled the halls of Westfield Academy. By the time the final bell rang, Sophia felt as though she'd run a mental marathon. As she walked home, the warm afternoon sun on her face, Sophia reflected on the day's events. It hadn't been perfect, far from it, but she'd survived. She'd made a friend in Mia, held her own in her classes, and navigated the complex social dynamics of a new school. Approaching her house, a stately colonial that spoke of old money and influence without being ostentatious, Sophia took a deep breath. She knew her parents would be eager to hear about her first day, and she wasn't quite sure what to tell them. As she opened the front door, the smell of her mother's famous lasagna wafted through the air, making her stomach growl. She found her parents in the kitchen, her father still in his suit from a day at City Hall, her mother wearing an apron over her designer dress. "There's our high school student," her father boomed, his face breaking into a wide smile. "How was your first day, sweetheart?" Sophia hesitated for a moment, then plastered on a smile. "It was interesting," she said, echoing her words to Mia. "The classes seem really challenging, and I think I made a friend." Her mother came over to give her a hug, studying her face closely. "That's wonderful, honey. But are you sure everything's okay? You look a little tired." Sophia nodded, not quite meeting her mother's eyes. "Just a long day, Mom. Lots to take in." As they sat down to dinner, Sophia listened to her parents talk about their days. Her father discussing city council meetings and community initiatives, her mother detailing a complex case she was working on. She marveled at their passion and dedication, feeling a renewed sense of determination to live up to their example. Later that night, as Sophia lay in bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, she thought about the day's events. The excitement of new beginnings, the warmth of a potential friendship with Mia, and the unsettling encounter with Mr. Thompson all swirled in her mind. She knew that high school would be full of challenges, both academic and social. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sophia made a silent promise to herself. She would face each day with courage and integrity, staying true to herself no matter what obstacles she might encounter. Little did she know that the incident with Mr. Thompson was just the beginning of a journey that would test her resilience, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately lead her to find her voice in ways she never could have imagined. As the weeks passed, Sophia settled into the rhythm of life at Westfield Academy. She threw herself into her studies with characteristic determination, spending long hours in the library and participating actively in class discussions. Her friendship with Mia blossomed, providing a much-needed source of laughter and support amidst the pressures of their demanding academic environment. But despite her best efforts, one dark cloud continued to loom over Sophia's school experience, Mr. Thompson's history class. What had begun as an unsettling first-day encounter had evolved into a persistent pattern of subtle but unmistakable bias. It was a crisp autumn morning when Sophia walked into Mr. Thompson's classroom, clutching her meticulously researched paper on the civil rights movement. She'd spent countless hours on this assignment, poring over primary sources and analyzing complex historical contexts. As she took her seat, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of pride in her work. Mr. Thompson began the class by handing back the papers from the previous assignment. As he moved through the rows, Sophia could hear murmurs of satisfaction from her classmates. When he reached her desk, however, his expression hardened. "Ms. Richardson," he said, his voice carrying a note of disdain that made Sophia's stomach clench. "I expected better from you. This work is lazy and unfocused. See me after class?" Sophia stared at the paper in disbelief. A large red C was scrawled across the top, accompanied by curt, dismissive comments. She felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of shame and indignation. How could he call her work lazy when she'd put so much effort into it? As the class progressed, Sophia found it hard to concentrate. She could feel the curious glances of her classmates, some sympathetic, others puzzled. When Mr. Thompson called on her to answer a question about the Reconstruction era, Sophia took a deep breath and launched into a thoughtful response, drawing on the additional reading she'd done. But before she could finish her point, Mr. Thompson cut her off. "That's enough, Ms. Richardson. Perhaps if you spent more time focusing on the assigned material instead of trying to show off, you'd have a better grasp of the basics." The class fell silent. Sophia felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she wasn't showing off but genuinely engaging with the material. Instead, she bit her lip and looked down at her desk, fighting back tears of frustration. As the bell rang and students began to file out, Sophia heard snippets of conversation around her. "Did you see that? Thompson's really got it out for her. Yeah, it's weird. She always seems prepared to me. Maybe she did something to piss him off?" Sophia approached Mr. Thompson's desk, her heart pounding. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she said, proud of how steady she kept her voice. Mr. Thompson looked up, his blue eyes cold. "Ms. Richardson, I hope you understand that in this class, success comes from hard work and focus, not from who you know or what advantages you might have outside of school." Sophia blinked, taken aback. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand. I worked really hard on this paper. I spent hours researching and—" "That's enough," Mr. Thompson interrupted. "I suggest you take a good look at your priorities, Ms. Richardson. This is a serious academic institution, not a place for you to coast by on your family's reputation." Sophia felt as if she'd been slapped. Family reputation? Did he know who her father was? And even if he did, how could he assume she was trying to coast by? She opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Thompson had already turned away, clearly dismissing her. As she walked out of the classroom, Sophia's mind was reeling. She'd always prided herself on her work ethic, on earning her achievements through dedication and effort. To have that questioned, To be accused of relying on advantages she'd deliberately chosen not to use felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. Outside, she found Mia waiting for her, concern etched on her face. "Sophia, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sophia shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Mia gently led her to a quiet corner of the courtyard, where they sat on a stone bench beneath a towering oak tree. "What happened in there?" Mia asked softly. Slowly, haltingly, Sophia recounted her conversation with Mr. Thompson. As she spoke, she could see Mia's expression changing from concern to outrage. "That's completely unfair," Mia exclaimed when Sophia finished. "He can't treat you like that. And what's all this about your family's reputation? Does he even know who your family is?" Sophia shrugged helplessly. "I don't know. I've never mentioned it to anyone. My parents wanted me to have a normal experience here, without people treating me differently, because of Dad's position." Mia's eyes widened. "Wait, what position?" "Sophia, who exactly is your dad?" Sophia hesitated, then sighed. She trusted Mia, and after what had just happened, she needed a friend who knew the whole truth. "My dad is Daniel Richardson, the mayor." Mia's jaw dropped. "The mayor?" "Sophia, that's wow. I had no idea. But wait, that makes what Mr. Thompson said even worse. He's making all these assumptions about you without even knowing the truth." Sophia nodded miserably. "I know. And the thing is, even if he did know, it shouldn't matter. I'm here on my own merits. I worked hard to get into this school, and I'm working hard to succeed here. Why can't he see that?" Mia reached out and squeezed Sophia's hand. "Because he's not looking, Sophia. He's seeing what he wants to see, not who you really are. But listen to me. You can't let him get to you. You're smart, you're hardworking, and you deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat at Mia's words. "Thanks, Mia. I don't know what to do. Should I tell my parents?" Mia considered Sophia's question carefully, her brow furrowed in thought. "That's a tough call," she said finally. "On one hand, your parents could probably help. I mean, your dad's the mayor. He could probably get Mr. Thompson fired with a snap of his fingers." Sophia shook her head vehemently. "No, that's exactly what I don't want. I don't want to use my dad's position to solve my problems. That would just prove Mr. Thompson right about me relying on my family's influence." Mia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I get it. But Sophia, this isn't just about you anymore. If Mr. Thompson is treating you this way, who's to say he isn't doing the same to other students? Maybe students who don't have the resources or support to stand up for themselves." Sophia hadn't considered that perspective before. The thought that other students might be suffering in silence made her stomach churn. "You're right," she said slowly. "But I still don't know if I should tell my parents. They've always encouraged me to handle my own problems, to be independent. There's a difference between being independent and suffering in silence," Mia pointed out gently. "Maybe you don't have to ask them to intervene. Just talking to them might help you figure out what to do next." As they continued to discuss the situation, the warning bell for their next class rang. Sophia gathered her things, feeling a mix of gratitude for Mia's support and apprehension about the days to come. "Thanks for listening, Mia," she said, managing a small smile. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Mia bumped Sophia's shoulder playfully. "That's what friends are for. And remember, whatever you decide to do about Mr. Thompson, I've got your back." Throughout the rest of the day, Sophia found it hard to concentrate on her classes. Her mind kept replaying Mr. Thompson's words, analyzing every interaction she'd had with him since the beginning of the school year. Had there been signs she'd missed? Should she have spoken up sooner? By the time she arrived home that afternoon, Sophia was emotionally exhausted. As she walked through the front door, she could hear her mother's voice drifting from the kitchen, engaged in what sounded like an intense phone conversation. "No, absolutely not," Evelyn was saying, her tone firm. "We cannot allow this kind of discrimination to continue. The evidence is clear, and we have a responsibility to act." Sophia paused in the hallway, curiosity piqued. It sounded like her mother was working on a case, probably something related to civil rights, an area of law that Evelyn was particularly passionate about. As she listened, Sophia couldn't help but draw parallels between whatever case her mother was discussing and her own situation with Mr. Thompson. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here was her mother, fighting against discrimination in the legal system, while Sophia was grappling with what felt like discrimination in her own school. Taking a deep breath, Sophia stepped into the kitchen. Her mother looked up, a smile breaking through her serious expression. "Sophia, how was school today, sweetheart?" For a moment, Sophia considered brushing off the question with a casual fine. It would be easy to keep her struggles to herself, to try and handle everything on her own as she'd been doing. But Mia's words echoed in her mind. There's a difference between being independent and suffering in silence. "Mom," Sophia began, her voice wavering slightly. I think I need to talk to you and Dad about something." Evelyn's expression immediately turned serious. She ended her call quickly, promising to continue the discussion later, and gave Sophia her full attention. "Of course, honey. What's going on?" As Sophia began to recount the situation with Mr. Thompson, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Her mother listened intently, her lawyer's mind clearly working to analyze the situation from all angles. "Oh, Sophia," Evelyn said when she'd finished, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you for telling me about this. You've been so strong, trying to handle this on your own." Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes, the stress of the past weeks finally catching up with her. "I didn't want to bother you and Dad," she mumbled into her mother's shoulder. "I thought I could handle it." Evelyn pulled back, looking Sophia in the eye. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You are never a bother to us. Your father and I are here to support you always. And while we admire your independence, there are times when it's important to ask for help." Just then, they heard the front door open, followed by the sound of Mayor Richardson's booming voice. "Hello, family. I'm home." As her father entered the kitchen, his smile faded when he saw the serious expressions on Sophia and Evelyn's faces. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. Evelyn looked at Sophia, silently asking for permission to share what she'd just learned. Sophia nodded, suddenly feeling too drained to go through the whole story again. As Evelyn filled Daniel in on the situation with Mr. Thompson, Sophia watched her father's expression change from concern to anger to determination. When Evelyn finished, Daniel turned to Sophia, his eyes soft with empathy. "Sophia, I want you to know how incredibly proud I am of you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've shown such strength and integrity in the face of this unfair treatment. But your mother is right. You don't have to face this alone." Sophia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "What should I do?" she asked, looking between her parents. "I don't want special treatment because of who you are, Dad. I want to handle this the right way." Daniel smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "That's my girl, always thinking about doing the right thing. Here's what I suggest. We document everything that's happened so far. Every interaction, every unfair grade, every comment Mr. Thompson has made. Then, we go through the proper channels at the school." Evelyn nodded in agreement. "That's right. We'll start with the principal. Present our concerns professionally and calmly. If that doesn't resolve the issue, we can escalate to the school board if necessary." Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for her parents' support and guidance. "But what if people find out you're involved? Won't that just make things worse?" Daniel shook his head. "Sophia, there's a difference between using my position to gain unfair advantages and standing up for what's right. If it comes to it, I won't be intervening as the mayor, but as your father. And that's a role I take very seriously." As they continued to discuss their plan of action, Sophia felt a renewed sense of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight. With her parents' support and Mia's friendship, she felt stronger, more capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. That night, as Sophia lay in bed, her mind was still buzzing with the day's events. She thought about Mr. Thompson, about the other students who might be facing similar treatment. She thought about the responsibility that came with having influential parents, and the fine line between using that influence for good and abusing it for personal gain. But most of all, she thought about the strength she'd found within herself. The strength to speak up, to seek help, to stand up for what was right. As she drifted off to sleep, Sophia made a silent vow to herself. No matter what happened with Mr. Thompson, she would use this experience to become stronger, to be a voice for those who might not have the support she did. Little did Sophia know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately shape her into the leader she was destined to become. The next morning, Sophia woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. As she got ready for school, she carefully packed a notebook dedicated to documenting her interactions with Mr. Thompson. She was determined to approach the situation methodically, just as her parents had advised. When she arrived at school, Mia was waiting for her at their usual spot near the lockers. "Hey," Mia said, her eyes searching Sophia's face. "How are you doing? Did you talk to your parents?" Sophia nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her friend's concern. "I did," she replied, her voice low as other students bustled around them. "They were really supportive. We're going to document everything and then go through the proper channels at school." Mia's face lit up. "That's great, Sophia. I'm so glad you told them. And listen, I've been thinking, I want to help. I've seen how Mr. Thompson treats you, and I'm willing to back you up if you need witnesses." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat at Mia's offer. "Thanks, Mia. That means a lot to me. But are you sure? I don't want you to get into trouble." Mia squared her shoulders, a determined look in her eyes. "I'm sure. What Mr. Thompson is doing isn't right, and I won't stand by and watch it happen. Besides, isn't that what friends are for?" As they headed to their first class, Sophia felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Gratitude for Mia's unwavering support, nervousness about confronting the situation with Mr. Thompson, and a growing sense of determination to see this through, not just for herself, but for any other student who might be facing similar treatment. The day progressed, and Sophia found herself hyper-aware of every interaction in Mr. Thompson's class. She diligently took notes, not just on the lesson, but on Mr. Thompson's behavior. The way he seemed to ignore her raised hand, the dismissive tone he used when addressing her contributions to class discussions. As the weeks went by, Sophia's notebook filled with detailed accounts of Mr. Thompson's behavior. She recorded dates, times, and specific incidents, being careful to stick to facts rather than emotions or interpretations. Mia, true to her word, contributed her own observations, providing an outside perspective that Sophia knew would be valuable if they needed to present their case. But it wasn't just Mia who had noticed the pattern of behavior. Other students in the class had begun to pick up on the tension between Mr. Thompson and Sophia. Some, like Jake Peterson, a quiet boy who sat near the back of the class, started to speak up more, often backing up Sophia's points or challenging Mr. Thompson when he dismissed her contributions unfairly. One particularly tense day, Mr. Thompson was discussing the civil rights movement, a topic Sophia had researched extensively for her previous paper. When he asked the class about the significance of the Montgomery bus boycott, Sophia raised her hand, eager to share her knowledge. Mr. Thompson's eyes swept over her, deliberately ignoring her raised hand. "Anyone else?" he asked, his gaze settling on a group of students who hadn't been participating much. Sophia felt a familiar surge of frustration, but before she could lower her hand, Jake spoke up from the back of the room. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness evident on his face, "I think Sophia has been trying to answer for a while now. Shouldn't we hear what she has to say?" The class fell silent, all eyes darting between Jake, Sophia, and Mr. Thompson. For a moment, Mr. Thompson looked taken aback, clearly not used to being challenged by his students. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Jake, then at Sophia. "Very well," he said, his voice tight. "Ms. Richardson, please enlighten us." Sophia took a deep breath, pushing aside her nervousness and frustration. She launched into a comprehensive explanation of the Montgomery bus boycott, detailing its origins, key figures like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., and its significance in the broader context of the civil rights movement. As she spoke, she could see a mix of reactions from her classmates. Some looked impressed, others surprised. Mr. Thompson's expression remained impassive, but Sophia thought she detected a flicker of something. Respect? Annoyance? In his eyes. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Thank you, Ms. Richardson," he said, his tone neutral. "That was thorough." As the class continued, Sophia felt a small sense of victory. She'd stood her ground, shared her knowledge, and even gained some support from her classmates. It wasn't a resolution to the ongoing issue with Mr. Thompson, but it felt like a step in the right direction. After class, Jake approached Sophia as she was packing up her books. "Hey," he said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say, that was really impressive what you said about the Montgomery bus boycott. And, I'm sorry I haven't spoken up before. It's not right how Mr. Thompson treats you." Sophia felt a rush of gratitude towards Jake. "Thanks," she said, offering him a smile. "And don't apologize. Speaking up isn't easy. I really appreciate what you did today." As they walked out of the classroom together, Sophia couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe things were starting to change. Maybe, with the support of friends like Mia and classmates like Jake, she can make a difference not just for herself, but for others who might be facing similar challenges. That evening, as Sophia sat at her desk, updating her notebook with the day's events, she reflected on how much had changed since the beginning of the school year. She'd gone from trying to blend in and handle everything on her own to building a support network and standing up for herself. She thought about her parents' advice, about the importance of documenting everything and going through proper channels. She thought about Mia's unwavering friendship and Jake's unexpected support. And she thought about Mr. Thompson, wondering if there was more to his behavior than met the eye. As she closed her notebook, Sophia made a decision. It was time to take the next step. Tomorrow, she would request a meeting with the principal. It wouldn't be easy, and she knew there might be consequences. But as she thought about Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and all the other civil rights leaders she'd studied, Sophia knew that sometimes standing up for what's right meant taking risks. With a mix of nervousness and determination, Sophia began to prepare for what she knew would be a challenging but necessary conversation. Whatever the outcome, she was ready to face it head-on, armed with the truth, supported by her friends and family, and driven by a deep-seated belief in justice and fairness. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Sophia couldn't help but wonder what the coming days would bring. Little did she know that her decision to speak up would set in motion a series of events that would not only change her life, but also leave a lasting impact on Westfield Academy and beyond. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a beautiful autumn day that belied the tension Sophia felt as she walked through the gates of Westfield Academy. Today was the day she had decided to take action, to formally address the issues with Mr. Thompson by speaking to the principal. As she made her way to the administrative offices, Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. She clutched her notebook tightly, its pages filled with meticulously documented incidents and observations. This was it, the moment she'd been building up to for weeks. Just as she was about to knock on the principal's door, a familiar voice called out behind her. "Sophia, wait up!" She turned to see Mia jogging towards her, slightly out of breath. "I wanted to catch you before you went in," Mia said, her eyes bright with concern and support. "Are you sure you want to do this alone? I could come with you, for moral support." Sophia felt a rush of gratitude for her friend's offer. "Thanks, Mia," she said, managing a small smile. "But I think this is something I need to do on my own. At least for now." Mia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Okay, but remember, I'm right here if you need me." And Sophia. She paused, her expression serious. "You've got this. What you're doing is brave and important." With a quick hug from Mia, Sophia turned back to the principal's door. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and knocked. "Come in," called a voice from inside. Sophia entered the office to find Principal Harriet Chin seated behind a large oak desk, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. Principal Chun was known for her fair but no-nonsense approach to running the school. "Ms. Richardson," Principal Chin said, looking up from her computer. "What can I do for you?" Sophia took a seat across from the principal, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her notebook on the desk. "Principal Chun, I need to talk to you about a serious issue I've been having with one of my teachers, Mr. Thompson." Principal Chin's eyebrows rose slightly, but she remained composed. "I see. Can you tell me more about this issue?" For the next 20 minutes, Sophia carefully laid out her concerns. She described Mr. Thompson's pattern of behavior, his dismissive attitude, and the unfair treatment she'd experienced in his class. As she spoke, she referenced specific incidents from her notebook, providing dates and details. Principal Chen listened attentively, her expression neutral as Sophia continued her account. The young student's voice grew steadier as she spoke, drawing strength from the facts she had so carefully documented. "And it's not just me," Sophia added, her voice taking on a note of urgency. "I've noticed Mr. Thompson seems to treat other students of color differently too. It's subtle, but it's there. The way he ignores our raised hands, the dismissive tone he uses when we contribute to discussions." As Sophia trailed off, Principal Chun leaned forward, her eyes sharp and focused. "Ms. Richardson, these are very serious allegations you're making. I want you to know that we take issues of discrimination and unfair treatment extremely seriously at Westfield Academy." Sophia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "I understand, Principal Chun. That's why I've been so careful to document everything. I wanted to make sure I had concrete examples before I came to you." Principal Chin reached for the notebook Sophia had placed on the desk. "May I?" she asked, and Sophia nodded her assent. As the principal flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed. Sophia watched anxiously, trying to gauge her reaction. After what felt like an eternity, Principal Chin closed the notebook and looked up at Sophia. "Ms. Richardson, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention," she said, her tone serious. "It takes courage to speak up about these issues, especially when they involve a teacher. I assure you that we will investigate this matter thoroughly and discreetly." Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly followed by a new concern. "Principal Chen, I don't want any special treatment because of who my father is. I want this to be handled fairly, just like it would be for any other student." A flicker of surprise crossed Principal Chen's face, quickly replaced by a look of respect. "I appreciate your integrity, Ms. Richardson. Rest assured, we handle all such complaints with equal seriousness, regardless of the student's background. Your father's position will have no bearing on our investigation or any actions we may take as a result." Sophia nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had been so worried about her father's position complicating matters, but Principal Chin's assurance helped ease that concern. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, her voice small but steady. Principal Chin leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "We'll conduct a thorough investigation. This will involve speaking with Mr. Thompson, observing his classes, and potentially interviewing other students. I'd like to keep your notebook for now, if that's all right with you. It will be crucial evidence in our investigation." Sophia nodded her agreement, feeling a strange mix of relief and nervousness at the thought of her carefully documented experiences being used in an official capacity. In the meantime, Principal Chin continued, "I want you to continue attending Mr. Thompson's class as normal. I know it might be uncomfortable, but it's important that we maintain the status quo while we investigate. Can you do that?" Sophia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. "Yes, I could do that." Principal Chin's expression softened slightly. "I know this isn't easy, Ms. Richardson, but I want you to know that you've done the right thing by coming forward. We'll do everything in our power to address this situation fairly and thoroughly." As Sophia left the principal's office, she felt as though she was walking in a daze. The conversation had gone better than she had dared to hope, but the reality of what lay ahead was starting to sink in. The investigation, the potential confrontation with Mr. Thompson, the possibility of her classmates finding out, it was overwhelming. Outside the administrative offices, she found Mia waiting anxiously. "Well?" Mia asked, her eyes wide with concern. "How did it go?" Sophia gave her friend a small smile. "It went okay, I think. Principal Chun is going to investigate. She's keeping my notebook as evidence." Mia let out a low whistle. "Wow, Sophia, that's huge. How are you feeling?" "Honestly, I'm not sure," Sophia admitted. "Relieved, I guess, but also scared. What if this makes things worse? What if Mr. Thompson finds out I reported him?" Mia put a comforting hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Hey, remember what you told me about your dad? About doing the right thing even when it's hard? That's exactly what you're doing now. And you're not alone in this. I've got your back, no matter what happens. Sophia felt a rush of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. Thanks, Mia. I don't know what I'd do without you. As they walked to their next class, Sophia's mind was racing. She knew that reporting Mr. Thompson was just the beginning. The real test would come in the days and weeks ahead, as the investigation unfolded and she had to face Mr. Thompson in class, knowing what she had set in motion. That afternoon, as Sophia sat in Mr. Thompson's history class, she felt as though every nerve in her body was on high alert. She watched Mr. Thompson closely, wondering if he knew about her meeting with Principal Chun. If he did, he showed no sign of it. He carried on with his lecture on the Cold War, his manner as brusque and dismissive as ever. When he called on Sophia to answer a question about the Berlin Wall, she felt her heart racing. But she took a deep breath, steadied herself, and gave a clear, concise answer. Mr. Thompson's only response was a curt nod before moving on to the next student. As the class progressed, Sophia couldn't help but notice the subtle ways Mr. Thompson interacted with different students. The encouraging nods he gave to some, the patient explanations he offered others, contrasted sharply with the curt responses and dismissive gestures he directed at her and a few other students of color. It was all so subtle, so easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But now that Sophia was hyper-aware of it, the pattern was unmistakable. She found herself wondering how she had ever doubted herself, how she had ever thought that maybe she was just being oversensitive. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Sophia felt a mix of emotions washing over her. Relief that she had made it through the class without incident, anger at the unfairness of Mr. Thompson's behavior, and a renewed determination to see this through, no matter how difficult it might become. That evening, as Sophia sat at her desk trying to focus on her homework, her mind kept wandering back to the events of the day. She thought about her conversation with Principal Chun, about the investigation that was now underway. She wondered what Mr. Thompson would say when confronted with the allegations. Would he deny everything? Try to justify his behavior? Or would he be forced to confront his own biases? Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock on her bedroom door. Sophia, her mother's voice called softly. "Can I come in?" "Sure, Mom," Sophia replied, pushing aside her textbook. Evelyn entered the room, her eyes immediately zeroing in on Sophia's troubled expression. "Honey, is everything okay? You've been awfully quiet since you got home from school." For a moment, Sophia considered brushing off her mother's concern. But then she remembered the relief she had felt when she finally opened up about Mr. Thompson. Taking a deep breath, she began to recount the day's events. As Sophia spoke, Evelyn listened intently, her lawyer's mind clearly working to analyze the situation. When Sophia finished, Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Sophia," she said finally, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and concern, "I want you to know how incredibly brave you are for speaking up. What you're doing isn't easy, but it's so important." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat at her mother's words. "Thanks, Mom. I hope I'm doing the right thing. What if it doesn't change anything? What if it just makes everything worse?" Evelyn moved to sit beside Sophia on the bed, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Change is never easy, sweetheart. And sometimes, when we stand up for what's right, things do get worse before they get better. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Your father and I have always taught you to stand up for your beliefs, to fight for justice. That's exactly what you're doing now." As Sophia leaned into her mother's embrace, she felt a sense of calm settling over her. Yes, the road ahead might be difficult. Yes, there might be challenges and setbacks. But she knew, deep in her heart, that she was doing the right thing. And with the support of her family and friends, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Little did Sophia know that the event she had set in motion would soon escalate beyond anything she could have imagined, testing her resolve in ways she never expected, and ultimately leading to a confrontation that would change not just her life, but the entire culture of Westfield Academy. As the days turned into weeks, Sophia found herself in a strange limbo. On the surface, everything at school seemed normal. She attended her classes, participated in discussions, and worked on assignments just like any other student. But underneath it all, there was a current of tension, a sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop. In Mr. Thompson's class, the atmosphere was particularly charged. Sophia couldn't help but notice that Mr. Thompson's behavior towards her had subtly shifted. He wasn't any kinder or more supportive, but there was a new wariness in his interactions with her, as if he sensed that something had changed. One particularly tense day, about 3 weeks after Sophia's meeting with Principal Chun, Mr. Thompson announced that the class would be doing presentations on various aspects of the civil rights movement. As he assigned topics, Sophia felt her heart sink when she heard her name. "Ms. Richardson," Mr. Thompson said, his voice carrying a hint of challenge. "You'll be presenting on the role of student activists in the movement. I expect a thorough analysis of their strategies and impact." Sophia nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. This was a topic she was passionate about, and she was determined to do it justice. Over the next week, she threw herself into her research, staying late at the library and poring over primary sources. She was so focused on her work that she barely noticed the curious glances from her classmates or the whispers that sometimes followed her in the hallways. Finally, the day of the presentations arrived. Sophia felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as she waited for her turn. She had prepared meticulously, creating a PowerPoint presentation filled with powerful images and quotes from student activists of the 1960s. When Mr. Thompson called her name, Sophia took a deep breath and walked to the front of the class. As she began her presentation, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her element, sharing knowledge, sparking discussions, challenging people to think differently. She spoke passionately about the courage of the student activists, about their commitment to nonviolent resistance in the face of brutal oppression. She drew parallels between their struggles and contemporary issues of racial justice, encouraging her classmates to consider how they might carry on the legacy of these young activists. As she spoke, Sophia could see her classmates becoming engaged, their eyes widening with interest and understanding. Even Mr. Thompson seemed to be listening intently, his usual dismissive expression replaced by one of grudging respect. But just as Sophia was hitting her stride, feeling confident and empowered, Mr. Thompson interrupted her. "That's enough, Ms. Richardson," he said, his voice sharp. "I think we've heard quite enough about your personal opinions on this matter." Sophia felt as if she'd been doused with cold water. "But sir," she protested, "I'm not finished. I still have to discuss the impact of—" "I said that's enough." Mr. Thompson cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You've already gone over your allotted time. Please take your seat." Sophia stood frozen for a moment, shock and anger warring inside her. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, could sense their confusion and discomfort. Slowly, she gathered her notes and returned to her seat, her cheeks burning with humiliation. As the next student began their presentation, Sophia barely heard a word. Her mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened. She had put so much work into that presentation, had been so careful to stick to the facts and present a balanced view. How could Mr. Thompson dismiss it so casually? The rest of the class passed in a blur. When the bell finally rang, Sophia gathered her things quickly, wanting nothing more than to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the classroom. But as she reached the door, she heard Mr. Thompson's voice behind her. "Ms. Richardson, a word, please." Sophia turned slowly, her heart pounding. Mr. Thompson was standing at his desk, his expression unreadable. As the last of her classmates filed out, some casting curious glances over their shoulders, Sophia approached the desk. "Yes, Mr. Thompson," she said, proud of how steady she kept her voice. Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "I hope you understand that in this class, we focus on historical facts, not personal interpretations or political agendas." Sophia felt a surge of indignation. "But sir, everything I presented was based on historical fact. I used primary sources and—" "That's enough," Mr. Thompson interrupted, his voice cold. "I suggest you take a good look at your priorities, Ms. Richardson. This is a serious academic institution, not a platform for you to push your own views." Sophia stood there, stunned by the unfairness of his words. She opened her mouth to protest, to defend herself, but Mr. Thompson had already turned away, clearly dismissing her. As she walked out of the classroom, Sophia's mind was reeling. She had always prided herself on her academic integrity, on her commitment to thorough research and balanced analysis. To have that questioned, To be accused of pushing an agenda when she had worked so hard to present a factual, well-researched presentation felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. Outside, she found Mia waiting for her, concern etched on her face. "Sophia? What happened in there? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sophia shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Mia gently led her to a quiet corner of the courtyard, where they sat on a stone bench beneath a towering oak tree. "Tell me everything," Mia said softly, and Sophia did. As she recounted what had happened during and after her presentation, Sophia could see Mia's expression changing from concern to outrage. "That's completely unfair," Mia exclaimed when Sophia finished. "He can't treat you like that. Your presentation was amazing, Sophia. Everyone could see how much work you put into it." Sophia nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I just don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried so hard to be objective, to stick to the facts. How could he accuse me of pushing an agenda?" Mia's eyes flashed with anger. "Because he's the one with an agenda, Sophia. He can't stand the fact that you're smart and well-informed and passionate about these issues. It threatens him." As they sat there, discussing what had happened and what it might mean for the ongoing investigation, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions washing over her. Anger at the unfairness of Mr. Thompson's treatment. Frustration at feeling powerless to change the situation. But also, underneath it all, a growing sense of determination. She had spoken up once, had taken the brave step of reporting Mr. Thompson's behavior to Principal Chun. Now, faced with this latest injustice, Sophia knew she couldn't back down. Whatever happened next, she was committed to seeing this through, to fighting for fairness and justice, not just for herself, but for all the students who might face similar treatment. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Sophia made a decision. She would document this latest incident in detail, adding it to the growing body of evidence against Mr. Thompson. And tomorrow, she would request another meeting with Principal Chun. The road ahead might be difficult, the challenges daunting, but Sophia was ready to face them head-on, armed with the truth and supported by friends like Mia who believed in her. Little did she know that this latest confrontation with Mr. Thompson was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake Westfield Academy to its core, forcing everyone, students, teachers, and administrators alike, to confront the uncomfortable realities of bias and discrimination in their midst. As Sophia walked home that evening, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily on her shoulders, but beneath the hurt and frustration, a spark of determination burned brightly. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them. The next morning, Sophia arrived at school early, her heart set on speaking with Principal Chun before classes began. As she approached the administrative offices, she saw a small crowd gathered outside, their voices hushed but urgent. Curiosity piqued, she drew closer, catching snippets of conversation. "Did you hear? Mr. Thompson, I can't believe it. What's going to happen now?" Sophia's pulse quickened. Something had happened, something involving Mr. Thompson. She spotted Mia in the crowd and made her way over. "Mia, what's going on?" she asked, her voice low. Mia's eyes were wide with excitement and disbelief. "Sophia, you're not going to believe this. Mr. Thompson, he's been suspended." Sophia felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "Suspended? But how? Why?" Before Mia could answer, the door to Principal Chin's office opened, and the principal herself stepped out. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to her. "Students," Principal Chin began, her voice calm but authoritative, "I know there have been many rumors circulating this morning. I want to address them directly. Mr. Thompson has indeed been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into allegations of discriminatory behavior." A collective gasp went up from the assembled students. Sophia felt her heart racing, a mix of shock and vindication washing over her. Principal Chun continued, "I want to assure you all that we take these allegations very seriously. Westfield Academy is committed to providing a fair and inclusive learning environment for all students. While the investigation is ongoing, Mr. Thompson's classes will be covered by substitute teachers. I ask for your patience and cooperation during this time. As Principal Chun finished speaking, the hallway erupted into a buzz of excited chatter. Sophia stood rooted to the spot, trying to process what she had just heard. She had known that reporting Mr. Thompson might lead to an investigation, but she never imagined it would result in his suspension. Mia grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her aside. Sophia, this is huge. Your speaking up must have really set things in motion. Sophia nodded, still feeling somewhat dazed. I guess so. I just never thought it would happen so fast. As they made their way to their first class, Sophia could feel the eyes of her fellow students on her. Some looked at her with newfound respect, others with curiosity, and a few with what seemed like resentment. She realized that word must have gotten out about her role in the situation. Throughout the day, Sophia found herself at the center of attention. Students she barely knew approached her, some to offer support, others to ask questions. In the cafeteria, she overheard snippets of conversations. I always knew there was something off about Mr. Thompson. But what if it's all a misunderstanding? Did you hear what he said to that girl in his class? By the time the final bell rang, Sophia felt emotionally and mentally exhausted. As she gathered her things from her locker, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Ms. Richardson, may I have a word? She turned to find Principal Chun standing there, her expression serious but kind. Of course, Principal Chun, Sophia replied, her heart racing once again. Principal Chun led her to a quiet corner of the hallway. I wanted to thank you personally for coming forward with your concerns about Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice low. Your bravery in speaking up has encouraged other students to share their experiences as well. The investigation is ongoing, but I want you to know that your actions have made a significant impact. Sophia felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Thank you, Principal Chun. I just wanted to do the right thing. The principal nodded, a hint of a smile on her face. And you did. However, I want to make sure you're prepared for what might come next. Situations like this can be challenging for everyone involved. If you need any support or if you face any difficulties with your classmates, please don't hesitate to come to me or any of the guidance counselors. As Sophia walked home that afternoon, her mind was reeling from the day's events. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that her concerns had been taken seriously, pride in knowing she had made a difference, but also a gnawing anxiety about what the coming days and weeks might bring. That evening, as she sat at the dinner table with her parents, Sophia finally shared the full story of what had been happening at school. Her father listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. Sophia, he said, his voice filled with emotion, I want you to know how incredibly proud your mother and I are of you. Standing up for what's right, especially when it's difficult, is one of the most important things a person can do. Her mother nodded in agreement. You've shown real courage, sweetheart. But I want you to know that this might not be the end of it. There may be challenges ahead, and not everyone will understand or support what you've done. Sophia nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. I know, Mom. I'm a little scared, to be honest. But I know I did the right thing. As she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, Sophia's mind wandered to all the possible outcomes of the situation. What if Mr. Thompson was fired? What if he wasn't, and she had to face him in class again? How would her classmates react in the long run? She thought about the other students who had come forward with their own stories of discrimination. She hadn't known there were others facing similar treatment, and the realization both saddened and strengthened her resolve. She wasn't alone in this fight. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity at Westfield Academy. The investigation into Mr. Thompson's conduct continued, with investigators interviewing students, teachers, and staff. Sophia found herself called in for several meetings, recounting her experiences in detail. In the hallways and classrooms, the atmosphere was charged with tension and speculation. Some students rallied around Sophia, praising her for her courage in speaking up. Others were more skeptical, questioning whether the allegations were overblown or misunderstood. Sophia tried to keep a low profile, focusing on her studies and relying on the support of friends like Mia. But she couldn't escape the feeling that she was at the center of a storm that was reshaping the entire school. One afternoon, about a month after Mr. Thompson's suspension, Sophia was called to Principal Chen's office. As she entered, She was surprised to see not only the principal, but also several members of the school board and a woman she didn't recognize. Principal Chen introduced the woman as Ms. Ramirez, an educational consultant specializing in diversity and inclusion. Ms. Richardson, Principal Chen began, her tone serious but kind. We've asked you here today because we want to discuss the findings of our investigation and our plans moving forward. Over the next hour, Sophia listened as the adults outlined what they had discovered. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior by Mr. Thompson, not just towards Sophia, but towards other students of color as well. But more than that, it had revealed systemic issues within the school that had allowed such behavior to go unchecked for so long. Your courage in coming forward has opened our eyes to problems we should have seen long ago, one of the board members told Sophia. We want to thank you for that, and to ask for your help as we work to make Westfield Academy a truly inclusive and equitable place for all students. Sophia felt overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. Of course, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to help in any way I can. As the meeting concluded, Ms. Ramirez approached Sophia. You've started something important here, she said, her eyes warm and encouraging. Change isn't easy, and there may be difficult times ahead. But know that you've made a real difference, not just for yourself, but for every student who comes after you. As Sophia left the office, her mind was spinning with everything she had learned. She felt a mix of emotions, pride in knowing her actions had led to real change, anxiety about the challenges that lay ahead, and a deep sense of responsibility for the role she now found herself in. She realized that this was just the beginning of a much longer journey. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But as she walked down the hallway, her head held high, Sophia knew that she was ready to face whatever came next. She had found her voice, and she was determined to use it to create the change she wanted to see in the world.